Since the beginning of a full-scale war, the Russian military has taken more than 1.5 million people to the Federation. Ukrainians are sent to the Far East and the most depressed regions of Russia. The Russian occupiers call forced deportation a humanitarian act of voluntary evacuation. In fact, in the cause there are threats and pressure.
They are stealing people. More than 1,600,000 of Ukrainians were forcibly deported to Russia. They are dispersed across the territory of this state, scattered throughout remote Russian regions. Many of them and their documents taken away. And many of them passed through terrible Russian filtration camps, where they were abused and intimidated. These are people, but for Russia, it's also a resource.
In the temporarily occupied part of the Luhansk region, the Russian army kidnaps whole villages of people. The Russian invaders are afraid that the armed forces of Ukraine will quickly learn about the location of their positions from local residents.
Violation of the international humanitarian law and the customs of warfare remains the norm of behavior for Russian military personnel in the temporarily occupied territories. So, in the Svatovo region, in order to hide the engineering equipment of the territories, the Russian invaders forcibly evicted the residents of the settlements of Goncharivka and Kuzemivka from their flats and took them deep into the temporarily occupied territory of the Luhansk region.
The Russian military has stepped up the deportation from the Kherson region too. There is a counteroffensive of the armed forces of Ukraine. Every sixth deportee is a child. The Russian occupiers have taken out about 260,000 Ukrainian kids. For understanding, this number is approximately equal to the population of such Ukrainian cities as Zhytomyr, Sumy or Chernivtsi. They take out those who live in the state institutions. For example, orphans Diana, Olena and Sofia have been deported from the Donetsk region of Ukraine to the Rostov region of Russia. But the Russian invaders also take away children who have parents. 6 kids of Olga Lopatkina were not released by the Russian military from Mariupol to their mother. On the contrary, they were taken even further deep into the temporarily occupied territory and were threatened that they would be given to foster families. It is through illegal and forced adoption that Russia turns Ukrainian children into war booty and does everything it can to make it difficult or impossible for them to return home. Some children are placed in healthcare facilities, some in children's institutions. They are displaced throughout the territory of the Russian Federation. To make it harder for us to find them, they send kids as far as possible from Ukraine, and this is a fact. They try to erase any belonging of the children to their native country. They try to erase their identical belonging. Definitely, all we have to remember is why the Russians are essentially abducting Ukrainian kids is the implementation of an act of genocide against the Ukrainian people. Daria Gerasimchuk, Commissioner of the President of Ukraine for Children's Rights and Rehabilitation, on the air of the National Telephone. The idea of filtration and deportation of people is not new for the Kremlin. Moscow uses the experience of the USSR. 75 years ago, in one day on October the 21st, 1947, the Soviet government deported 78,000 residents of the western regions of Ukraine to Siberia. 3/4 of the deportees were women and children. This act of genocide went down in history as Operation West. To help the Ukrainians who were forcibly taken out by the Russian invaders in 2022, the Cabinet of Ministers has simplified the mechanisms for obtaining a special certificate. It will be easier to return home with it, they say in the government.
There are hundreds of thousands of such people, and we have already encountered situations when people were taken out without documents, or then they were taken away. So we are launching an identity document for returning to Ukraine. This document will be available to family members of the deportees at the State Migration Service. It will also be possible to obtain a document on the basis of an application to the Ministry of Reintegration.
Issuing a certificate is free. One can receive the document within 5 days from the date of application. Reported by Dana Kolesnik, Valeria Nekapelova, UATV News.